Alright, let's dive into something that's been making waves recently, a story that feels like it's straight out of a spy thriller. Imagine this: President Trump, in the midst of escalating tensions with Iran, secretly switches planes in Turkey to avoid a potential missile attack. Sounds like a plot twist, right? But this actually happened, and it's got me thinking about the lengths world leaders go to for security, the implications of such a move, and what it reveals about the current global political climate. First off, what makes this really interesting is the level of secrecy involved. According to reports, Trump was whisked away from Air Force One and onto another plane using a catering truck as a decoy. Personally, I think this speaks volumes about the trust, or lack thereof, in modern intelligence. If the US had credible intel about an Iranian missile threat, it shows just how volatile the situation was. But it also raises a deeper question: how often do these kinds of covert operations happen without us ever knowing? It's a reminder that what we see in the news is just the tip of the iceberg. Now, let's talk about the decision to use the older Air Force One as a decoy. Trump publicly stated he was switching planes for old time's sake, but behind the scenes, the Secret Service reportedly advised him to take the older plane for security reasons. In my opinion, this is a classic example of political theater. Leaders often have to balance transparency with security, and here, Trump's public explanation was clearly a smokescreen. What many people don't realize is that these kinds of ruses aren't just about protecting one person, they're about maintaining stability in an increasingly unstable world. What this really suggests is that the US-Iran conflict was far more precarious than many of us understood at the time. Trump himself called Iran's leaders sleaze bags and labeled himself their number one target. From my perspective, this kind of rhetoric doesn't just escalate tensions, it makes these kinds of security measures feel almost inevitable. But it also highlights the human element in geopolitics. Leaders aren't just making decisions in a vacuum, they're reacting to threats, real or perceived, and those reactions have global consequences. One thing that immediately stands out is the frustration from Trump administration officials over the leak. They're worried that exposing these tactics could compromise future operations. Personally, I think this is a valid concern, but it also underscores the tension between national security and public accountability. If you take a step back and think about it, every leak like this is a double-edged sword. It informs the public but potentially weakens the very systems designed to protect leaders. A detail I find fascinating is how the press and some staff members were unknowingly on the decoy plane. Trump even told reporters to keep the window shades closed, hinting at the danger without revealing the full picture. This raises a deeper question: how much do we, as the public, have a right to know about these kinds of operations? In my opinion, transparency is crucial, but there's a fine line between keeping people informed and jeopardizing security. It's a balance that's harder to strike than it seems. Finally, let's talk about the bigger trend here. This incident didn't happen in a vacuum. It's part of a broader pattern of escalating tensions between the US and Iran, fueled by decades of mistrust and conflict. What this really suggests is that we're living in an era where even routine travel for world leaders can become a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. Personally, I think this should serve as a wake-up call. If leaders are going to such extremes to protect themselves, it's a sign that diplomacy and de-escalation need to take center stage. So, here's my closing thought: this story isn't just about a plain switch, it's about the fragility of global security, the complexities of leadership, and the invisible forces shaping our world. It makes me wonder, how many more of these covert operations are happening right now, and what does that mean for the future? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Are these kinds of measures necessary, or do they signal a deeper problem? Let's keep the conversation going.